Live via satellite, broadcasting the gospel around the world to over 170 nations, including North America, to Asia, into the Middle East, into Europe, and to Africa. Welcome to TCT Alive. Our faithful prayer partners are standing by to take your calls during the next hour as we lift up the name of Jesus. Now, let's welcome your TCT Alive hosts.
Welcome to TCT Alive. My name is Pastor David Longobardo of Christ Covenant Church in Greensboro, North Carolina, and our broadcast today is coming from the beautiful studios at Channel 61 in Greensboro, and we have a great TCT Alive program today. Christ said, "I've come to give you life and give it to you more abundantly." And on this broadcast today, you're going to hear about the abundant life in Jesus Christ. We have a wonderful guest that will be with us in just a moment. His name is Tona, and he is from Annapolis, Maryland. Tony has had his life changed by the love of Jesus Christ and the power of the Holy Spirit. He is reaching out to men and women who are homeless, those that are in drug addictions, those that are in alcoholism, people oftentimes that others don't want to even recognize. He's ministering effectively to them. He's been interviewed by the city police of Baltimore. He has been written up in news articles about his unique ministry, and you'll meet him in just a few moments. The Webb family is going to provide some very special music throughout our hour, and then we'll be interviewing Bishop Bloomer. Bishop Bloomer has written a great book. It's called Witchcraft in the Pews. And we're going to talk about the spiritual warfare that the enemy is waging against the Church of Jesus Christ and gain Bishop Bloomer's unique perspective on how we can overcome the works of the enemy in our generation. But right now, joining me on the set is Tona. Tony, a pleasure to have you. Welcome.
Thank you, Dave.
Now, you are dressed in very unique style. You are a minister at large, right, ministering in the Annapolis area, Washington, D.C., the Baltimore area, and not just there. You have a television program that's touching the nation and going many, many different places.
Right.
But let's begin by you sharing with us for a few moments how the Lord changed Tony's life, because you grew up in Brooklyn.
Right.
You're Italian, like I'm Italian. You came from a Roman Catholic background, like I did. But how did the Lord arrest Tony's life and change your life?
Well, at the time I was going through a divorce. I had a business, and I was in the process of losing my business. And I was despair. I was having problems. The pressure was on, and I had a family. I had 2 kids, and I still have 2 kids, and just felt the pressure. I needed help. And someone gave me a track, maybe a month or 2 before, and he talked to me a little bit about God, but it went in one ear and out the other. I really didn't take any notice or attention to what he was saying. But one day I was just in this apartment. I was in the bottom apartment of this on this peninsula, on this island, and I really felt bad, really bad that day. And I went out and I went to my bag and I took this track out and I started to read it. And all of a sudden, as I was reading it, I saw the word sin in big letters right in front of me. I just visualized it all right in front of me, sin. And my eyes opened. And I knew something happened, but I didn't know what, because I didn't know what born again meant, what was going on in my life. But I knew there was a change, and that particular evening. And as I got up the next morning, I went outside, and I noticed that even the grass was greener, and I heard the birds chirping. Everything looked bright. And it was about 7 o'clock in the morning, and it was during the summertime, and I just saw the world and the area I was living in a different way. But again, I still didn't know what happened, so this is amazing how God works. Right across the yard, there was this other gentleman who was out there, and I went over to him one evening. It was the same day or the day before, next day. And I said to him, I said, I went through this experience. I said, you know anything about it? And he happened to be Mennonite. And he said to me, yeah, he says, you just received Christ into your life that night. I says, what? He says, yeah, you're born again that night. He said, it happened to me maybe years ago when he got saved, and he kind of guided me. But God was right there to keep me right in that, the way I felt, keep my eyes open, and gave me some guidance through the person that he had there for me. Was unbelievable. And again, I still was bewildered as to what took place, but I was saved that night.
That was the changing point.
That was the changing point.
Tell us about this, Tony. You have a very unique ministry right now. Now, you're not dressed like the average pastor. You don't have a clerical collar on. You don't wear a white collar. You're not dressed in suit and tie. But you're dressed in your ministerial garb, because your ministry is on the street to people who are hurting, broken. How did that come about? How did your call to people in those kind of conditions and those kind of needs come about? And is it as a result of the background that you were saved from?
No, I had no problems with drugs. I wasn't an alcoholic. I came from I would say not a middle-income family. My father was a presser. He worked in Manhattan. My mother was just a housewife, and we lived in a little apartment in my grandfather's house.
So homelessness, addiction, those things weren't really a part of your life.
No. But I felt that, when the Lord the Lord came into my life, I felt the compassion of God. Mm-hmm. And that's a lacking in this world today with ministers and Christians today. I just felt that compassion. So when I seen somebody out in the street, I went over to him and I asked him, "What was your problem?" What really got me.
You just go up to him. What's your problem? Okay.
Well, if he was crying about something, or she had a problem, or she needed a ride, I started helping people.
Sure.
Then I noticed, as I was doing this day after day and month after month, that I would take these people and bring them into the church, and the churches would just ignore them. Mm-hmm. I'm saying, I just can't understand this. Why the Bible teaches us to love God and love your neighbor, and He's my neighbor. Why is the church doing this? So what I did was I continued at it. I started to grow. I started to get involved more and more with different ministries, shelter ministries, ministries that were reaching out. Here I was still working the streets, and I developed my own contact list where I'd pick up these people from the street, and I'd take them and I'd put them in discipleship programs. First I'd get them saved, and I'd work with them. I started counseling them, and that's how it developed from those little early days of my life.
As your ministry has developed and the impact of it, and again, you're not limited to Annapolis, but that's kind of the beachhead for your ministry. And I know Annapolis very well. I know the city. It's a beautiful, quaint little city, but most people wouldn't realize how much drugs, how much homelessness, how many needs are of people. Everybody thinks of the Naval Academy and well-educated people and upper crust, but there are a lot of people with need. You have been so effective that the city police have called you in, use you at times in crisis situations. Tell us a little bit about how that developed and how city governments started contacting you because of the work you've been doing with people who are homeless and in drugs.
Well, I had several articles written about me in the paper, and apparently the police got a hold of it. And this judge, a retired judge, I was working for them. He was a liaison with them, and he called me in one day and got me involved with the officers there that were on duty, and they interviewed me on television. But as I would go along through the months and through the years, I would meet them out in the street, and they would ask me, "How you doing? Is there any problems?" Or they see me transporting somebody, need any help? And I got to know some of them while I was there, and they really kind of watched out for me.
Yes.
But I knew God was watching out for me, and I would go into some of these really drug-infested areas. Now, working the front lines is pretty tough. You don't know what's going to happen. These guys are carrying knives, guns, and even women. So, and I've caught them with guns, and they're shooting up right in front of you. So, they had me on their show, and apparently that was they got to know me. A year later, they called me up, wanted me to come back, and I did another interview with them, and that's how things started to change.
Obviously, they don't find a lot of people with your background that are just on the street helping folks that have these kind of needs.
Right.
In 2005, you had a very unique experience. The Lord laid it on your heart to spend several weeks in New York City on the street.
Right.
Give us a little background. Let me see if I have this straight. The Lord led you to go to New York with you get a bus ticket, you already paid, but you only have $5 in your pocket to live on the street for 4 weeks in New York City. $5 doesn't go very long in New York City. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, in 2005, I made my trip. God called me before that. He wanted me to go to New York, spend 4 weeks, the month of May, to live on the streets. So I started saying, well, I'll take $100 with me, I'll take $50 with me. It came down to $5. God said, I want you to take $5 with you. and I just packed a little peanut butter sandwich and I took off. I paid for the bus ticket already. I got there, still had the $5 in my pocket. I had to get from the bus terminal down to where I was going to stay, which was at a shelter that I kind of geared in on, and called them at one time and found a little bit about it, what the procedure was, and signing in for the night. So I took the train actually down to the street in Lexington Avenue. Was a New York City rescue mission. And so it cost me, I think, $2.50 at the time, so I was down at $2.50. My $5 was half gone already.
Yep.
So I went up to the office there, and I asked the people, what's the procedure getting in for the night? Got to come back at 5 o'clock and wait online like everybody else. Never really told them who I was.
Right.
Was not looking for any special privileges at all. God told me he wanted me there. He wanted me to help the people that are in the street.
You were going there to minister.
I was going there cold.
Sure.
And so I got there, went out in this little park, a real bad park, a lot of drugs activity going on, and it was amazing. The first two people that came up to me were prostitutes, two women, and I got pictures of them, and I prayed with them. They received Christ.
Wow.
So after that, the Lord said to me, see, I told you I needed you here. And then I get back, wait online, and go through the whole process of staying there and getting up at 5:15 or 5:30 in the morning. You had to be out of the building. So I would get up in the morning and just go out in the street and pray for the city of New York, and I would see these guys shooting up in the morning and all kinds of crazy things. Fights would break out, And I'd go to the missions and I would eat there, and by the first couple of days, that $5 was gone.
Yep.
But God blessed me. It was definitely an adventure. I met this one guy. He was a businessman, didn't know who he was. Let me give you a real quick story. I was in this park. It's called Sarah D. Roosevelt Park. I was reading my Bible one morning. I was there a week. And this guy was sitting alongside of me. Closed my Bible up. Never said a word to him. Never even looked in his eyes. And I walked away. He was reading the newspaper. Plus, he looked like he was a construction worker. There was a site going on. They were digging up the streets. And I left. The next day, I came back. And here he was sitting in the same spot. And as I walked up on him, he was reading his Bible. And I never said a word to this guy. And I walked up to him, and I started laughing. I said, why are you reading your Bible? He says to me, well, I saw you reading your Bible yesterday, and I started to read mine.
Wow.
So we drummed up a conversation. I told him who I was. He was really shocked to hear that someone would come from Annapolis, Maryland, to live on the streets for 4 weeks in Manhattan. And, there's 38,000 homeless people on those streets in Manhattan.
Just in Manhattan?
Just in Manhattan alone, and that's not including Brooklyn or the airports, because a lot of them are living in the airports. So eventually, I never said anything but a word about money. And this guy took out a roll and gave me $50. I was there a whole week. I went out and I got myself something that was cooked well, and I got myself a salad, and I really enjoyed that, and I knew God was with me. Just kind of leading me on, showing me things that were going on in my life. He became a good friend of mine, that guy.
Tony, a lot of people don't get involved with people who are homeless or drug addicts or prostitutes because of the fear factor, the unknown factor. Are they going to get hurt? Are they putting their own life or the life of someone else in jeopardy if they reach out? Or if they reach out, how can they reach out effectively? Put a face on people for just a moment. And here's what I mean by that. Talk about someone you've ministered to throughout your ministry, a name and a face of an individual that you've seen the grace of God change their life, and help people to understand if we can overcome that fear factor, right, what God can do in us and through us. Put a face on
Okay, I got one particular guy in mind, running drugs, was arrested, crossed state lines. Everybody was looking for him. He had 3 warrants out on him. I met him in a shelter in the city of Annapolis. I talked to him for a while. He didn't want anything to do with Jesus. About a week later, I went back and I met up with him again, talked to him again. He said, I want to ask God in my life, could you help me? See, that the Spirit was just working on him.
Yes.
And I prayed with him that day. And I said to him, listen, you got some warrants. We have to take care of that. Went back to Jersey, took care of that warrant. Went back to Delaware.
Traveled with him?
Yeah, I took him.
Right, okay.
I easily got up, took him, drove him back to these different areas, 3 different jurisdictions,
sure,
3 different states, and we took care of all the warrants out on him. Kind of the judge left him in my responsibility. Today, this is going back 14, 15 years ago. Today, this guy is born again, saved, married, 3 kids, and he works for a ministry in Detroit. And they just had 50 alcoholics and drug addicts graduate from that ministry.
That he's working with now.
Yeah, he was second in command.
Fantastic.
He's second in command. That's the individual.
Now your ministry is expanding. The Lord's given you a television ministry. You're interfacing with other churches and other ministries. Tell us something. How can a church get involved with what you're talking about, and what's the need?
Yeah, I think the first thing they need to do is to, of course, start to talk and preach the gospel about what is the responsibility to their parishioners, their congregation, of what they're supposed to be doing with people in such situations. And one of the things I've been going around telling people about and telling ministers was, first of all, when you're building a church or you add an extension on or a building, you ought to put a couple of rooms in there, a couple of beds, a couple of bunk beds, whatever you want to do, bathrooms, kitchens, showers. And when there's people that are having problems out in the street and they don't have a place to stay, you ought to take them into your church and you have the congregation work with them. They're looking for a job. There are people in your congregation. See, that's where the assets are. That's where the tools are. Those people have to be used. You take, even if you take just 10 people out of the congregation and say, you're responsible for this one homeless person, get them a job, get them a place to stay, and keep working with them, you're going to see changes in the church, not only in the people that are homeless, you're going to see changes in the minister, changes in the church. And that's a way of starting.
You shared with me about a concept of ministry that you've seen work in some places called Winter
Relief.
Talk about that. Share that.
Okay, Winter Relief is a program where 35, 40 churches are involved during the coldest months of the year. Let's say November to April, and it's in Maryland. Now, they're all over. They're in different counties. They're in different states probably. I'm not quite sure of that, but I know they're in different counties. And what they do, they take these homeless people in. One church each week takes a homeless person in the whole week. Now, we breathalyze them. They give them new beds to sleep on. When I say new beds, do clean sheets.
Linens, sure.
Bed, sheets and pillowcases. They give them cots to sleep on. This stuff is all worked out with the parishioners in the church, and what they do is they pick them up, they're breathalyzed, make sure they're not intoxicated.
Right.
Of course, you can't really test them for drugs. Mm-hmm. And you take them down. They're actually screened at this one point of contact. And it's usually 30, 40, maybe 50 of them, and women involved too. And what they do is this church takes these people, they bring them back to their congregation, to their building, and they house them for the whole week. And they don't house them 24/7. What they do is they bring them in for the evening, feed them, bed them down for the night. If they need a shower, they give them a shower. They even wash their clothes.
Right.
And also, I let them out in the morning, give them a breakfast, and take them a bag lunch.
Right.
And what they do is they come pick them up the next time around, 5 o'clock, and they go through the whole process. But they don't stay in the church during the week.
Right. They're working or doing
what? Right. Only at night. And what that does, it breaks down the barriers. It becomes one-on-one with the homeless people. The churches get involved. The people get involved. You know, there's actually churches today that can't wait for their turn to come around just to do this. And it's only 1 week out of the year, and that's a way of starting.
And they're helping these folks get back on their feet is what they're really doing.
It starts to mushroom, and other churches want to get involved.
Great program.
Oh, absolutely.
The Lord's blessed you with a TV program. It started out as a public access program. It's going on. What do you emphasize on your program? If we tuned in, and we're going to give the website information where people can access that info. But what do you emphasize with your television program?
Well, you know, I'm still working with the homeless, so on and so forth. And there's 37 million people in this country to go hungry every day.
Say it again.
37 million people that go hungry every day in this country. And not only in this country, we are responsible for the whole world.
Sure.
We are the moral guide. The church is the moral guide to this world, and we have backslidden. Mm-hmm. The whole church is in disarray. We need to get back to the basics, and that's what we need to do. And the church is lacking in this area. You know, the greatest commandment is to love God and love your neighbor. Those are the two most important commandments. There's nothing greater than that.
Yeah.
And we fail to recognize that. So everyone that's born again, that should be the first thing in their lives is to love God and love your neighbor. Now, those homeless people, whatever you want to call them, they're my neighbor.
Yeah.
And I got to go out and love them, and I have to show the love of Jesus. You know, they're urinating in their pants, they're throwing up in the cars. You know, they're a complete mess.
Yeah.
But you got to go and put your arms around them.
Yep.
Okay, and we are lacking in that.
So you're using your television broadcast really as a lightning rod for churches and Christians to become more proactive and being a part of the solution rather than pointing the finger or or like the priest in the parable that Christ talked about of the Good Samaritan, those that didn't want to get their hands dirty. You're really using your television program to provoke the church to get involved in a proactive way.
I have to live it myself to preach it. And like even last year, my income was no more than $14,000, a little more than $14,000. I never asked for money. You know, my primary goal is to do what Jesus wants me to do, and he wasn't after the money. And if you look at the apostles and the disciples, they're out there, they're not asking for money or for wealth. They use that money to help others. Now, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with a preacher getting a salary. I'm not putting that down. But how much of a salary is he entitled to?
Exactly.
We lost it. And a lot of them are out for their own gain, a lot of Christian brothers and sisters. And I'm sorry to say this. You know, I make mistakes too.
Sure.
But this is an area that he's really driven me to. He wants me to really push this issue. And I thank the station for allowing me to do this.
Tony, if someone accesses your website, tell me what they'll find. Will they find information about your television broadcast? Will they find information about how they can make contact with you? What will they find if they access it? Because in a minute, I want you, we're going to bring up your website information if people want to make contact with your ministry.
Well, I'm not right now. I'm kind of a one-man operation with Jesus, and I have people that help me occasionally, but they're not really dedicated. So I don't wait around for people. I just go out and do what I have to do during the day. So I'm limited. I right now have a website, and I'll give you the website number.
Actually, we've got it up on the screen right now. Go right ahead, Tony.
Okay, it's www.tonytona.org.
Amen.
And you'll see I have some videos on there. We just started up with this website, and I have a letter on there that I've written that God commissioned me to write. So we're going to add more stuff to it.
Tony, we've got about 3 minutes left. If there are people watching us right now who maybe feel very ostracized from everyone else, maybe very unloved, maybe there's someone sitting in a motel or a hotel room right now, they're going through that divorce, or maybe they just lost a job. What would you say to them to give them hope?
There's definitely hope. They can have their lives changed right where they're standing or sitting. God is a loving God. He loves you. He wants you to change. He doesn't like what you do if you're into drugs, alcohol. If you're living in the world and you're stealing and you're ripping off people, he wants you to change your life around. It's better on the other side of the fence. Always remember this. The devil will always take you back.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
But you stick with God, you can't lose. You can't lose.
Tony, thank you for coming to be with us, and God bless you, your ministry. Thank you for reaching out to people who need the love of Christ the most, and thank you for being a lightning rod to really awaken the church to its need and responsibility in the vast ministry that exists in reaching out to people who oftentimes need the gospel and need us more than those that we're entertaining, if you will. And so thank you. Thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for coming and sharing your testimony and what you're doing in Annapolis, what you're doing through your television broadcast. God bless you. And thank you for being here.
Thank you.